I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. We got to do a breakdown of this incredible debate performance by the Democratic candidate for senator in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, who's currently the 45th lieutenant governor of the great state of Wisconsin. He's running against MAGA Republican extremist Ron Johnson, who spent one of his 4th of Julys over in Russia, not making that up. But this debate was incredible on the part of Mandela Barnes, one of the best debate performances I've seen. I want to show you and want to show the people of Wisconsin the difference between the Democratic candidate, the pro-democracy candidate, Mandela Barnes, and the MAGA extremist candidate, Ron Johnson, who wants to overturn and repeal Social Security, who cheered on the overturning of Roe v. Wade, who believes that dangerous criminals should be able to buy their way out of prison sentences, just to name a few things. So I want to start off with Mandela Barnes talking about how his opponent, Ron Johnson, said Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Play this clip.
Remains fully funded. Lieutenant Governor Barnes, you'll go first. You each have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. When I think about Social Security, I think about my grandparents, I think about my parents, I think about so many other retired Americans who paid into a system who deserve to retire with some dignity and respect. Now, it's unfortunate that Senator Johnson said that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. There was even an instance where he called Social Security candy. He called Social Security candy. This was keeping people who have worked their entire lives afloat. And the threat to take that away from them does not sit well with me, along with most other people. Now, what we need to do is not just make Social Security solvent. We should strengthen Social Security. We can do that by making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. We need to make sure that billionaires are paying more into this system. Now, the senator goes on about the deficit, but he had no problem blowing a $2 trillion hole into the deficit by passing the 2017 tax bill that gave $215 million in tax deductions to his biggest donors in a single year. And he wants to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block. He's in it for his wealthy donors, not working people. Your time is up.
So after that, the moderator asked Ron Johnson, said, you have proposed reviewing Social Security rather than having it be an entitlement. And Johnson goes, you're putting words in my mouth. Go. Ron Johnson, you actually said those words. Here's the thing with these MAGA Republicans. They just gaslight. They lie and they lie and they lie. But let's play that clip.
Medicare would be at the top of the priority list. I've never, ever said I would cut it or put it in the chopping block. That is a false attack.
Called it a Ponzi scheme and
sir,
called it candy.
Lieutenant Governor, this is his time, and I'm going to add a little time to that to once again, you have proposed reviewing Social Security rather than having it be what's called an entitlement, which means it goes on.
You're putting words in my mouth.
All right, sir.
I was talking about we have. Part of the reason we're $31 trillion in debt now is because we separate mandatory versus discretionary spending. Right. We don't even look at 70% of the budget. And so we spend like drunken sailors on the other 30%. We need to combine everything, look at all of it, so we start prioritizing spending. We can't afford, for example, to spend $369 billion on the Green New Deal fantasy that, of course, the Lieutenant Governor
But back to entitlement
supports.
Versus review, your position.
Pardon?
Back to whether or
it's
not
an entitlement. We have to honor those promises, but the greatest threat to those promises is the out-of-control deficit spending.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go to the next question, Monty Ricosa.
Here we have Mandela Barnes talking about the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and he points out that Ron Johnson's America is the type of America where a 10-year-old girl who is the victim of rape has to carry her rapist child to term, and her rapist gets more rights than her. Play this clip.
The question that has to be answered is, at what point does society have the responsibility to protect life? It's just that simple. And I've actually laid out a sample referendum ballot, and you can also find that at wisfax.com.
Okay. Lieutenant Governor Barnes?
Well, the senator knows very well that the referendum won't happen with the legislature we have now. This is him trying to run away from his dangerous, out of touch, and extreme position. And when you take a position like that, there's so much that you don't always see. Let's talk about Texas as an example. There's a woman who had to be hooked up to a breathing machine because she had complications with her pregnancy and could not get an abortion. A 10-year-old girl in Ohio was raped and had to cross state lines to get an abortion. That's Ron Johnson's America. And 70% of the people think Roe versus Wade should be the law of the land here. Now, when we talk about children and unplanned pregnancies, Senator Johnson once went so far as to say it's not his responsibility to take care of our children in this country. Won't even support the child tax credit. Now, people are dealing with some very tough circumstances, but the senator will rather make a political point than to do the right thing to protect families and to protect the health of women.
And here Mandela Barnes again talks about how Senator Johnson called for overturning Roe v. Wade and that he celebrated the Dobbs decision. Here, play that clip.
So much. Well, I'm an only child, but I'm not my mother's only pregnancy. Before I was born, my mother had a complicated pregnancy, and she had an abortion. She shared her story because she wanted others to know that they aren't alone and that it was her decision to make, not some politicians. And every woman should be able to make that decision. And doctors shouldn't have to live under the threat of being criminalized for helping women through their most difficult decisions. Now, the senator called the overturning of Roe versus Wade a victory. He celebrated the Dobbs decision. And he said that if women don't like the laws of their state, like the 1849 criminal abortion ban we have here, he said they can move. I can't think of a more callous, out of touch, or extreme position to take. If I were in the U.S. Senate, I would absolutely vote to codify Roe versus Wade to protect the right to an abortion and the right to choose into law once and for all to protect women's rights.
There's another significant moment in the debate where Ron Johnson said that his heart goes out to police officers, or he's thinking about police officers when people talk about defunding the police or whatever he was saying there. And then Mandela Barnes points out, you actually supported the insurrection, sir. You supported the attack on police officers. So yeah, you want to make this phony pro-police position right now that you have when you're running for office, but when you actually had to show what you cared about with actions, you were perfectly okay with the police officers and the Capitol police officers being attacked. Look how Senator Johnson walked right into this. Play the clip.
Whenever I see a police officer, I go up to him and I say, thank you for your service. And if I have time, I say, please don't be dispirited by the loud few who are trying to defund you.
And the senator on the last question did mention, police officers. Now, with that being said, I'm sure he didn't have the same interaction with the 140 officers that were injured during the January 6th insurrection. One officer was stabbed with a metal stake, another crushed between a revolving door, another hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. So when we talk about respect for law enforcement, let's talk about the 140 officers that he left behind because of an insurrection that he supported. Now, with that.
Then there was another moment where Ron Johnson says that relating to the insurrection, that when he got back to the office on January 6th, that he wasn't really impacted by what was going on and that he didn't know what was happening. And Mandela Barnes points out, he goes, Ron Johnson may not have noticed an insurrection was happening because he believed those insurrectionists were patriots. Play this clip.
I want to remind everybody that when I got back to my office on January 6th, because I was not impacted by what was happening in the Capitol, I didn't know what was happening until I turned on the TV, I immediately and forcefully and have repeatedly condemned it.
So let's clear that up. And he may not have noticed that an insurrection was happening because he called those people patriots. He called them tourists. These are the folks that he supported. This is an act that he supported. And he can make whatever comparisons he wants to. But the reality is this was an attempted overthrow of the government by trying to overturn a free and fair election. So the answer is yes. The vice president did do the right thing.
I think here was another important moment of the debate where Mandela Barnes was talking about his idea of bail reform. And he was saying, under my plan, dangerous people don't get to buy their way out of prison. And Senator Johnson may be used to him and his friends buying their way out of situations, but the amount of money you have shouldn't be the determining factor if you get a get out of jail free card here in the United States of America. Play this clip.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this question because it has been sensationalized and it's also been mischaracterized. Now, I supported bail reform. Now, under my plan, dangerous people don't get to buy their way out of prison. Now, Senator Johnson may not have encountered a problem he couldn't buy his way out of, but that's not reality for a majority of people in this state. And what has come to light is how people have unfortunately used the Waukesha tragedy, even going so far as to using in commercials, re-traumatizing families. Now, under my plan, the perpetrator wouldn't have been able to get out if he paid $1,000 or $100,000. This is about keeping people safe by making sure that those who are likely to offend and cause harm do not get to buy their way out of jail. That's the system that we have now. And this sort of reform that I support has been supported by Republicans all across the country as well.
And there were two, I thought, other great moments by Mandela Barnes. One where he says the right for a person to marry who they love should absolutely be a no-brainer. The right to make a decision with your doctor about your reproductive health should be a no-brainer. Here, play this clip.
We're talking about a civil right. We're talking about the right for a person to marry who they love. Normally, this would be a no-brainer. This is something I've supported as a member of the legislature, and it's something I would be proud to support as a member of the United States Senate. Now, he said that the Supreme Court decision won't be overturned. A lot of people thought that Roe wouldn't be overturned. But look at us now. We're in a position where we are losing rights. People are having fewer rights than they had 50 years ago. That's exactly what's on the line with this election. We need people who are going to fight for our fundamental freedoms. To be able to marry who you love, again, that should be a no-brainer. It's a shame that we're in this place right now having this same old tired argument, but here we are. We need people who are going to fight to make sure you can love who you love and also make your own healthcare decisions without interference from politicians.
And here, when Ron Johnson was asked about whether or not he supports same-sex marriage, Ron Johnson dodged the question and said the Obergefell decision, that decision won't ever be overturned. Roe v. Wade was overturned appropriately, he says, by the Supreme Court. That was bad law, but he says Obergefell will never. Don't worry about it. And he dodged the question. He wouldn't answer directly his own support of same-sex marriage because he doesn't support same-sex marriage. He just says, oh, trust me, trust us. The Supreme Court is just never going to overturn the Obergefell decision. Really? Because that literally was in the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, that they should evaluate their other decisions that were based on these same rights that were previously believed to be something that all Americans had, which was now removed from women in the case of overturning Roe v. Wade, and that Obergefell and contraception is next. That was literally what the Supreme Court said when they overturned Roe v. Wade. But let's see what Ron Johnson said here when he says Obergefell will never be overturned. Play the clip.
So first of all, I've always supported civil unions. When the Supreme Court ruled a different way and ruled for gay marriage, I thought, okay, there's an issue. It's been settled. Let's move on. We have a lot of other problems we have to deal with. That Supreme Court decision will never be overturned. This is another scare tactic by the left. I know Justice Thomas kind of opened up the door, but this is where stare decisis is very powerful, where you're not going to disrupt millions of lives. I don't want millions of lives disrupted.
I mean, again, just so entirely disingenuous here. And finally, I thought this was one of the very impactful moments of the debate. And this is where Mandela Barnes says, look, if you're a multimillionaire like Ron Johnson will look out for you. But meanwhile, the middle class and working people have been abandoned by Ron Johnson. Play this clip.
Well, I actually embrace one of the characterizations in one of the ads that they put out, either Senator Johnson or one of his allies. It ends by saying, Mandela Barnes, different. I embrace that because we don't have enough working class people in the United States Senate. The Senate is broken. Senator Johnson is one of the worst parts of a broken system, a person who has been in it for himself and his wealthy donors. Sure, if you're a multimillionaire, he'll look out for you. But if you're a working class person, it might not be so easy. That's the unfortunate reality. People are continuing to be left behind, and that's exactly why I'm running right now. Our lives and our livelihoods are on the line at this very moment. Our seniors have to live with the threat of Social Security and Medicare being cut. Working people have to live under the threat of their jobs being shipped overseas. Women have to live with the threat of their most personal decisions being interrupted by politicians. That's what's on the line right now. But I believe better is possible. I believe hard work can pay off and we can give everyone a fair shot at the American dream.
So I thought a very powerful debate. The contrast could not be clearer. You have someone in Ron Johnson who's lying, who's running from his record, and what he's willing to admit to is harmful to people. It's harmful to people. I mean, why would we want to elect a senator who's looking out for billionaires, who's going to raise the prices of prescription drugs, who taunts us regarding the existence of Social Security, who talks about, said it before, he wants to lie and gaslight us here, but talks about repealing Social Security and taking away Medicare. And why? I mean, we're not billionaires, okay? We're not decamillionaires or millionaires. I mean, working class Americans need to have people who represent their interest. Ron Johnson? Couldn't it be more obvious that Ron Johnson, he had a chance to represent you. He has not represent your interest. He's going to continue to sell you out. And with that, you know what, eating grin of his, give every benefit possible to millionaires and billionaires, period. That's what he's going to do. That's what we saw right there. Anyway, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Until next time, hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers. Oh, and check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. That's one of the ways you can help grow this independent media channel, patreon.com/MeidasTouch.
This November is Rowvember. MeidasTouch just released its brand new collection of Rowvember t-shirts and pins to let the country know what's at stake this upcoming midterm election. Go to store.MeidasTouch.com to grab yours. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.